I'm going to lay out as much of this for you as I'm comfortable laying out. You're really only scraping the surface of crazy at this point. The story you heard that night, it's true. And that's from Sasquatch Hulu. And this is Jen.
This is Becky.
And this is Too Close to Home. And we're coming up on our finale of Bigfoot and the Emerald Triangle.
I love it. These episodes make me happy.
So,
until we get to the murder.
Until we get to the murder. That is always a little bit of a bummer, isn't it?
It is.
You know, it's hard having a true crime podcast that is also comedy centric, you know. Got to figure out where you're going to put those ha-has in. So my sources are Sasquatch on Hulu, Wikipedia, the California Adventure District, BBC, Cash Crop by Ray Raphael, Humboldt by Emily Brady, National Forest Foundation, Sasquatch Detective, Southern Style, Sweet Tea, Bigfoot in the Native American folklore, a deep dive into a cultural legacy, the History Channel, nichecanada.org, North California Indian Development Cooperation, University of Arizona, Arizona State Museum, Oregon Historical Societies, Oregon Encyclopedia, The Reflector, Lake County Record Bee, Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science by Jeff Meldrum, The Cannabis Trail, and the Indigenous Peoples Resources website.
Yay!
Look, you know, sometimes I get really mad that I'm like, I only got 3 episodes and I had to read all of that.
Right?
And then I remember, oh, well, you do this just for funsies anyways, because wormhole. So last time we talked about the Emerald Triangle's creation. We finished talking about the Patterson-Gimlin film. Today, we're going to end our story with an accusation against our beloved Sasquatch. So let's head back to talking about weed in NorCal. Like we had just finished talking about Anslinger and his gore files. Okay, sorry.
I was like, did I do something?
No,
Did she wait for me to take my sippy sip of my drink?
I'm just high. Just high.
High on life, right?
High on life.
That's right. Not anything to do with Emerald Triangle.
Nothing.
I mean, sometimes you have to really immerse yourself in the story.
Yes.
And so...
What do they call it? Embedding reporting?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just embedding. Like being in my bed smoking weed.
It's for the story.
It's for the... You guys, I had to get really on Bigfoot's level. So while frowned on by the conservative establishment, NorCal became the Wild West of weed and would become the pioneers of today's marijuana industry without realizing it. In the first years of growing in the Triangle, growers used sativa strains of cannabis, but the game would really change when people started smuggling in indica seeds from the east to grow in California. So we're going to talk about a little weed science.
Okay. Educate me.
Sativa, your mom's going to be so proud. Sativa it will get you high, but the high is more energizing, uplifting, euphoric. It's known as a cerebral high. Indica has a higher CBD content, which makes it good for pain relief, anxiety, and depression. It's a body high. And then you have hybrids of both. I mean, basically, all the strains are just mixes of the two. That's it.
Oh, interesting.
All this time, I'm
know
like,
that.
oh, it's all these different plants, you know? No, it's just 2 strains and just different percentages.
Oh,
and how they're grown. Sometimes they're grown indoors. Sometimes they're grown outdoors. Sometimes they're grown by hydroponics.
So that's why when you go to a head shop, because I mean, I've been to head shops, they'll ask like, what do you need the weed for?
Yeah.
And then they know like which percentage of what to give you.
Exactly. And
interesting. It really is a whole science, isn't it?
And for somebody who smokes weed, until I really like got into some of the science behind this, I'm like, oh, well, that explains a lot.
So can you go into a head shop and be like, I just want to get fucking stoned, and they know which one to give you?
I have done.
Or
that.
do you need to go into a head shop and be like, oh, it's my headaches?
When my dad died, I even told them that. I was like, listen, my dad died. I'm gonna need some good shit. Okay, I'm gonna need some apocalyptic shit to pull the sadness away.
Interesting. Were they like, got it? Grapevine, blah, blah, blah.
They're really like holistic doctors.
They are. I'm loving this. I'm going to need it. So I have people and they all have jobs for when the apocalypse comes. Now I need a weed guy.
Exactly.
Okay. Good to know. He can work with me in the medicinal shop.
Exactly. So the way it was grown and cultivated would change again with a new technique to create plants with no seeds in the mid-70s called sinsemilla. And I had heard of sinsemilla, but I did not know. I knew it was like something cannabis related. I was like, listen, weed just gets me high. Why do I need to know anything else about it?
Never heard of it, so you're educating me along with the general public. Carry on. Doing your deed, and I feel like you're a more reliable source than RFK.
You know what? That is a huge compliment. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry.
So you probably have seen like maybe videos or heard about people talking about smoking seeds in their weed. Smoking seeds, like, it's very acrid.
What do you think I watch?
Listen, all I'm guessing is like you also grew up in the era of Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg.
Oh, okay, yes.
You've heard them talk about raps about smoking seeds and shit like that.
Okay, yes.
Or the joke that, you know,
like, what is she
you leave your seeds in on the 4th of July, so it's like fireworks happening in your weed.
Interesting. No, I have not, but that sounds fun.
It's so much fun. But the seeds are like really not something people enjoy smoking.
Right. Don't they typically grind it down to get the seeds out?
Well, back in the day, they'd pick them out.
Right.
But when they created Sensimilla, plants would grow without seeds in them at all, so you didn't have to pick them out anymore.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
A lot of the stuff you get now is Sensimilla, and it's actually gone on where it used to be where they would pull the male plants when they started sprouting and just leave the female plants. Well, now they have, what is it?
So the males have the seeds?
They have feminized seeds, so you don't even have to worry about pulling the males out anymore.
Okay.
So then there's no worries about seeds. And then also they sell seeds now, and instead of leaving in, like some people go to the farmer's market and they keep the seeds from tomatoes and grow their tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then you're not going to go by that farmer's market, are you?
Right.
You're not going to go buy that weed dealer if you can grow your own weed, are you?
Oh, okay. I see what can you go buy packets of seeds like you do peas and okay.
You can order it right now.
God, I'm getting so much education.
I remember growing up, my dad smoked the shit out of pot. And I remember he had the same can, and his wife to this day still has this can. A lot of childhood memories, okay?
Is it like one of those cans that were used for sewing kits?
Kind of like that, yeah. And it was all dented and stuff, and there would be like a whole pile of seeds at the bottom. And when my dad died, we were having a memorial. And so we had went in his room and pulled all of these things that had to do with him. And one of them was this box. And I was like, you think we could just like empty the contents out and bring the box? Because it really was Dad. Everybody saw this box. Our family knew this box.
Oh.
My uncles knew this box. She's like, we can't do that, Jennifer. It smells too much like weed.
So does he.
And I'm like, do you think anyone's going to be surprised?
Do you think they got high when he was cremated?
His favorite band was the Doobie Brothers. Come on.
I do also enjoy the Doobie Brothers.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Blackwater, keep on rolling. So the lack of seeds aren't the big selling point. It's the fact that THC is actually much higher in Sensimilla as well.
Mm.
There's a lot of confusion. People think that you have to have a huge THC content to get really high, and it's not necessarily the case. And that's where all those illnesses are coming from, having way too much THC. What was it like? There's a comedian, Cat Williams, who was talking about like white people just find new ways to get high. They just get too high. You'd be regretting everything.
Like, from what I understand, there's like a wax or oil that you can smoke.
Like resin. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Called dabs. You get a dab rig. Listen, no.
Yeah.
One time,
that's how you fuck around and find out.
I wasn't feeling good because a lot of mine is for my stomach. And I sent Jimmy to the store to get me something to make me feel better, but my mom had some gummies. Well, my mom's a lady, and I just didn't think about how strong these gummies were. Took her gummy. Jimmy brought me some more. I took some of those. I got too high and ended up having to lay face down on my bed.
You got white people high?
I got white people high. Like, oh my God, this is not enjoyable anymore.
And you have nothing to do but just wait till it wears off.
Exactly. Just hold on. Hold on to the bed for dear life.
The bed that's not moving.
Not at all. It's like worse than being drunk. You know, like when you're drunk and you put your foot on the floor to steady the room. But when everything's melting, what do you do?
Eye. Close one eye when you're drunk.
I knew a girl, and I do not advocate this, but she says, you know, back in my youth, I used to drink and drive, which I don't advocate anymore. But this is how I always got down the road without any problems. You know those little reflectors that are in the middle of the road?
Just hit them?
You just hit them and you know you're following. And I was like, oh my God.
feel like that's probably a dead ringer for cops that
Yeah.
something ain't right. Most of us hit them and go, oh, oof, get back in the lane.
Meanwhile, you're just dun 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 dun. So, now this brought in good money, but that scale jumped even higher when the American government decided to spray the Mexican marijuana fields with a herbicide called paraquat. This made people worried about contamination, so they stopped buying Mexican weed and really started the demand for California weed. And with the passage of California's Moscone Act in 1975, possessing small amounts of weed was actually decriminalized, making it a civil and not a criminal offense. Sorry, I feel like I can't breathe. It's the weed, I guess. I don't know. Now, if you're peddling to children, cultivating for sale, there were, of course, stiffer penalties and punishments. Now that the demand was great and people were making whole-ass careers out of an illegal commodity with little worry of outside interference, it would have a huge effect on the triangle structure. While it started out with people just trying to go back to the land, that first green rush of paraquat spraying would bring people to the area who saw dollar signs. And we all know that when money comes, so does greed and violence. And with extra greed and violence, so comes the cops. In 1983, California's Department of Justice composed a task force of not only local, but federal agencies tasked to eradicate illegal cannabis cultivation and trafficking in California, dubbed the Campaign Against Marijuana Planting. Quote, "When the locals welcome the feds" is the title of an article I read written by CAMP, which is their acronym. So cleverly. It is described about their work about getting control over those evil pot farmers. Oh, man.
They're so bad.
They were rather witty with names, so it's no surprise that they were the ones who actually coined the moniker the Emerald Triangle. Made it sound more infamous, didn't it?
It does.
What do you have? What's the Bermuda Triangle?
The Alaskan Triangle?
I don't know. I'd rather be lost in the Emerald one.
If I had to pick a triangle to get lost in, that would be the one.
Put me amongst the sequoias and weed trees.
I don't want to be lost in the water, and I don't want to be lost in the snow, so...
But damn sure.
I'll get lost in the weed.
Camp is still active, although its mission has pivoted to a more regulation and environmental concerns after the Compassionate Use Act later happened and legalization happened. There was actually significant concern because those large grows have on the environment. You have like all the different pesticides. Mm-hmm. They'll do illegal cutting. There's all sorts of things that are just not ethical planting. And that's what these people are doing. You think about like those gold miners that would come to California and they would just do whatever they could to make some money.
And then just leave all their stuff and not care about what they did to the land or...
Exactly. Their primary objectives were reducing the supply to marijuana to the illegal drug trade by eradicating the large marijuana crop sites, increasing public and environmental safety by removing marijuana growers from public and private lands, investigating indoor growing operations, deterring potential growers, and promoting public information and education on marijuana. That's literally the quote of their primary objectives. This wasn't just focused on the Triangle, but California as a whole, and it used law enforcement officials from every corner of the nation to pool their resources to be able to pull off the operation. There were the usuals of the DEA, California Highway Patrol, the ATF, and of course, dozens of local law enforcement, but they also utilize or have utilized for organizations like the U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, because you can't get fishes high, okay? It's rude. The IRS, the California Franchise Tax Board, many more. Initially, I'm sure you wonder why they might be involved as they are not law enforcement entities, but remember, they have resources available to aid in investigations. And it would be so much cheaper if they just all worked together for a common purpose, right? And they also needed the expertise of some of these entities, and above all, the use of their equipment, like helicopters. Get to the chopper. A big problem that had emerged in the Triangle was guerrilla growing. He wasn't glowing, okay?
You don't know that.
Maybe
he might have got exfoliated before.
You know, they did say gorillas come from, what was that movie? Gorillas of the Mist.
Oh, yeah.
They were glowing.
Exactly.
With dew. This practice is growing on land that doesn't belong to you. It reduces the risk to the grower personally at the potential cost of losing your product. They did not discriminate about what land either. Some of it was just private property, and some of it was that of national parks or other governmental property. So, like, you could just be going through the woods and, whoops,
Going for a little hike.
So beginning in 1988, Camp created CRAT, Camp Reconnaissance Arrest Team program, and they loved the use of aerial recon via chopper to find those grow sites. Reading accounts of growers who had been there for years and being victim to camp raids is kind of a bummer. I mean, it really is. Like, you're like, oh, it's supposed to be, the law enforcement was supposed to be the good guys and the weed growers are the bad guys. But when you read these growers and who they are, and it's like, oh, y'all are just like trying to hold down small business, okay? Very fucking rude of you.
Just trying to start their own Etsy shop.
I mean, while there were huge grows that were affected, it affected small farmers too. The old hippies that, yes, sometimes sell to dealers, but are otherwise minding their own business, blitzed while they grow in the deep redwoods of NorCal. And for many of them, this has been their livelihood for the last couple decades, so it caused the community to change once again. With this change, there was a very interesting cultural phenomena of familial secrets. So weed was illegal far before the 1960s. So when families moved in and the areas started growing, public services grew as well. And you know what's considered a public service?
Weed.
That and public schools.
Could you imagine your job just being in the middle of the redwoods?
Oh my God.
Wouldn't that be great?
You know what I did today? I keep, everywhere I go, I keep the it on my weather app so I can scroll through all the different places I've been to see what the weather. I know it's really fucking lame. But today in California and San Francisco, it's 61 degrees.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Exactly. And you wouldn't want to be out there growing some weed in 61-degree beautiful weather in the redwoods.
Exactly.
I'd be lost.
Glowing from the mist off the trees.
Just hanging out with the bananas, slugs.
That's right. They ain't here
I've
to
almost
hurt
called
nobody.
them squids. I was like, that's not what they are. You have weed growers sending their children to school. How does one approach a 7-year-old and teach them that snitches get stitches?
Exactly how you just said.
But it's not really nothing. It's really not a joke. Camp had caused chaos with the choppers looking for grows and all the raids. They were in communities constantly to degrees that they were never able to before because these people were way out in the fucking woods. They had never really had cops just casually coming on by.
Right.
And now you have choppers every fucking time you turn around. Bill Rusamenti was part of the DEA and a camp commander, and he would speak on their approach. Quote, the helicopters have provided us with a sense of superiority that has in fact established a paranoia in the grower's mind and has kept us from getting involved in violence with the growers. It is not perceived as an equal situation where they might conceivably fight and win. When you come in with a helicopter, there's no way there's going to stop and fight. By and large, they head for the hills and we don't get a confrontational situation. Just that word superiority, I was like,
yeah, I didn't like that
bet you
either.
did. And honestly, I saw a lot of interviews with these people who were a part of camp, and these guys looked back at it was like the good old days. Like, oh, it was so much fun torturing all these people.
Oh, I bet it was. For them. Because that, you know.
And that's what some growers did. They packed up and they left. Others who couldn't or wouldn't leave, hashtag fight the power, hashtag resist, you know. It was overkill for coming after a plan. A whole year could be gone in an afternoon of a camp visit. Like, they literally, there's videos of them just like chop, 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 and then burning all the weed.
Because that's good for the environment.
So good for it. With the amount of weed seized, the market was empty and the cost of weed skyrocketed. So did the chances of being ripped off by thieves or being caught by camp. It was like pressure cooker situation, just growing and growing and really leaving an imprint on people. I read the account of a young lady who had been raised growing weed with her single mother, but had left for college in the early 90s. It was interesting to know the unique perspective of having an illegal substance around you at all times and not knowing it as a child until one day it clicks. For me, it was in DARE class. They held up a shadow box with drugs and drug paraphernalia, and it was quite clearly between the crack pipe and the Coke spoon was a joint. That's what my parents were smoking. And the inner turmoil, like, oh my God, what are they going to do? But mine was never as high a stakes as this young lady. Her experience was of having the constant fear of hearing those choppers coming, her community closing the ranks and to protect each other. And then as people aged, the children raised there grew up, and they had to make a hard choice of staying to continue to grow or moving somewhere that they could find work legally. She would leave eventually for college, and the stark difference between her reality and the reality of her college roommate was very noticeable. Her roommate was from Oakland, which by all accounts is super dangerous, but she remarked on the sheer amount of funeral service programs of extremely young people that this young lady possessed, who was from NorCal. They had all died because they stayed behind and became victims to extreme drug violence that ran rampant in the Triangle at the time. The fact that this girl from Oakland, California was like, girl, you know a lot of dead young people. She's like, but you're from Oakland. She's like, it ain't that bad. It ain't like that. The statistics stayed pretty consistent, and the violence per capita was extremely high. In 2018, Humboldt was the county with the second highest homicide rate in California, despite there only being 136,000 people living there.
Wow.
Then there was the arrival of the trimmigrants. Immigrants? Trim. So these are marijuana workers, and it could mean a wide range of things. Okay, they could be growing for someone else, just living on the grow site, doing all the work, like a sharecropper type of situation, where he labors for a percentage of the profit or of the product. Or they could be someone who just brought in for a day work where they trim the buds off the plants during harvest time. They could just be seasonal workers, like in every other type of farm. They're just there to pick up seasonal work while enjoying the fruits of said labor. While they themselves were not there to cause violence, they brought with them hard drugs and, of course, guns to protect all those drugs. I heard a story of a fellow who wanted to maximize profit, so he ran off cocaine and speed, cultivating by himself, making loads of cash, but doing nothing but working on growing. Growing and making cash, and growing and making cash. Not getting no fucking sleep. And then one day he died of a heart attack.
Yeah, probably from all the coke.
Mm-hmm.
It does that.
It really
Put you into SVT.
Not good for you guys.
Not good.
I know it sounds like I'm very pro-drugs. I'm just pro-weed. Let's get this straight. Those harder drugs, well, they had dealers too. And some of those dealers were Hells Angels who had already been in the area near Spy Rock since the late 60s and early 70s, also growing weed. Again, it's a green rush, not a gold rush, a green rush. Everybody's coming. All the while, the paramilitary presence at camp was ever present. The 90s would bring in Prop 215, the Compassionate Use Act, but not before our boy from Sasquatch decides to spend some time on a farm in Spy Rock Road as a trimmigrant in 1993.
Oh, Sassie was out there trimming weed?
The guy, Mr. Holthouse, who heard about Sasquatch killing people.
Oh, okay.
This is the moment you've been waiting for. The story that would probably only need half the contextual exposition, but here we are. The alleged murder of trimmigrants by Bigfoot. Now, if you want to watch a show, or you already have, this is my telling of the story. It's not 100% word for word, but it's me. So this will be interesting. Regardless, I do recommend watching it and learning more about David Holthouse's impressive work. But onward. He really does have, sad. This is a sad thing, but he was sexually assaulted as a little boy. And he ended up stalking and going to jail for stalking his abuser in his adulthood because he wanted to it's like a whole thing. And he ended up writing an article about it, got rewards for it. He's a very good journalist. You know, he's been undercover with neo-Nazis, all sorts of things. But
interesting.
This is my favorite part, though, the weed stuff. The weed and Bigfoot.
And, we all work through our trauma different ways. Some people go to therapy, some stalk their abuser.
Yeah, okay.
Whatever helps you cope.
Whatever blows your skirt up. You know what I mean?
That's right. I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to lend a listening ear.
That's right. Support.
And tell you, yeah, fuck that motherfucker.
Fuck that motherfucker.
Anyway, back to the story.
So being known for a journalist he went after the nitty-gritty stories about the bad guys of the world. Quote, I believe the truth is never told in 9 to 5 hours. And it's something he said that really sums him up as a person. Extremely inquisitive and determined to get the story that others felt less safe doing, like working with drug mules and gangs and meth heads, the loveliest parts of society. He noticed that people of ill repute often felt comfortable in his presence. And I mean, he seems like a chill, no-nonsense dude. And what are criminals if not just people who were caught? But I digress. Before he was in journalism, he was a young 23-year-old dude headed to a to work on a cannabis farm up 101 in Mendocino County. It was his first time in the area, his friend having to use a 4x4 to get him further and further into the woods, super remote. Like, he starts off on a highway, and then his friend picks him up in his 4x4 truck, and they just keep going out on, like, more secluded roads, more roads with, like, logs over them and shit. Like, you're going out in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
He hadn't been there very long that day when he started hearing Sasquatch stories from other growers. A couple of stories about huge boulders being thrown, Sasquatch tribes being angry that the growers are encroaching on their turf, but he felt it was a blinker fluid type of situation. You know what blinker fluid is?
Yes.
For those who don't know, one of my first jobs was I worked at a Napa Auto Parts, and they tried pulling that on me. Blinker fluid is not real. They told me to go look for it. Little did they know, I grew up poor and had to work on my own vehicles back when they still came with those big-ass manuals, okay? He didn't take it serious at all to hear all these supposed sightings of Sasquatch. And not that you should be scared of Sasquatch. I mean, but the way they poised the stories was that Bigfoot was violent as hell. Regardless, the first day was uneventful, but the second night would be different. That dark, rainy night, he was with his friend at the grower's house, just rolling doobies after a hard day's work, when the grower got a call. The grower would seem tense, asking about a run and if everything was okay, followed by a, all right, let's keep it mellow. You gotta keep him mellow, which never fucking sounds good. 15 to 20 minutes later, a truck comes up with two wet and muddy guys. One of them is freaking the fuck out. He would remark on that guy's crazy eyes. He was shifting back and forth, looking paranoid and everything. It made him nervous, so he just I just melted into the couch and pretended like I wasn't there.
Right.
Which is always a good thing to do when you have meth addicts around you.
It is.
Pretend you're a wall.
A ficus, maybe.
Right? And so, the guy's talking to the guy, and they're all kind of doing it in hushed whispers, and the owner's like, be cool, be cool, be cool, be cool, be cool. While the guys are like, like, this is happening, that's happening. No, I'm telling you, man, it wasn't a ripoff. The weed's still there. It's torn up. It's thrown around. It wasn't a ripoff. And the guy was like, are you sure they're dead? And the panic guy's like, are you fucking not listening to me? Yes, I'm sure they are dead. They're fucking mangled. The dude who came with them spoke up and said, yeah, man, they're mangled. Like, yeah, from the Sandlot. Yeah, man, yeah. The man would say he had just seen 3 bodies torn to pieces, repeating in a frantic tone, we have to warn everyone. And he began to speak again, but was hushed by the grower. And he would speak over it and saying, I'm telling you, man, Bigfoot killed those guys.
I'd be like, how much meth did you smoke?
How did it taste? Real chemically? Like battery acid?
Like wasp spray?
I did meet a girl one time. She was a stripper. And she had just gotten out of prison, and she was beautiful. And she was young, older than me, but still young. And I was like, what were you in prison? Oh, I made meth for a living. Oh. And she was like deaf in one ear, apparently.
Were a
and had some
exploded.
vision sides from an explosion.
Yeah.
Talked about how like taking batteries apart and stuff. I was like, ma'am, I'm surprised you have all your fingers.
Oh, no thank you. Hard pass. I'll go to school.
She was a sweetheart, and I learned
she
that you
was.
can indeed turn a hoe into a housewife.
Oh, she like
Yeah, she
makes
changed her whole life around.
bread now and
Yeah,
works at the 7-Eleven.
like a trad wife.
Okay.
Good on her.
I bet she can make some crafts for her kids.
I bet she can.
All right, then. No judgment.
I bet she's really
for
good
you.
with the super glue. Not the huffing part, but I mean, anyways. After this happened, he wouldn't speak about it again for years. Not even sure it really happened. Thankfully for us,
he never went and found the bodies?
No,
He
was
just took
like,
their word for it?
you know what? This is a not my business situation.
They weren't on his property, dead, mangled?
Well, it's not his property. He was on a grower's property. So the guy, he didn't own it. He was just there as a day worker.
Oh,
basically.
the guy that sunk into the couch is telling this. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Thankfully, for us, he turned that curiosity into an investigation to see if it ever really happened eventually. Quote, I've borne witness to a lot of crazy fucking stories, but the one about Sasquatch wasting 3 dudes in dope country is bar none the craziest, all right? And for a quarter century and then some, I've just been carrying it with me, keeping it close. It's not in my nature to just set it down and walk away and forget about it, Because sure, maybe it's just a ghost story. Maybe there's nothing to it. Or maybe someone got away with murder. And maybe I can find out who and how and why.
See, he minded his business for a little while. He should just kept on minding his business.
He poured over dead and missing reported in that area in that time frame. That was his first step. Like, okay, let me make sure that I'm not just like, I was tripping on some fucking crazy weed that was laced with something, you know?
Let's see if he followed the same investigative steps that I followed when I believed that John could see a ghost when he was little. First thing I did, looked for dead and missing children.
Exactly. So, nothing came up, though, for people in that time frame.
Nothing came up for John either.
Nothing. And so he went and he talked to the only other witness he still knew and spoke to the guy to help see if his memories were also accurate. And the guys were like, yeah, I remember too. And I also remember being scared as shit the whole fucking time I was up there. And that's when David decided to like an onion, let's peel the layers of this story. This meant reaching out to anyone and everyone he could to find a lead. And that took some time. It doesn't help that he's asking about a cryptid murder. So he hired a PI who used to work for Mendocino County and decided to pivot to Sasquatch hunters while waiting on leads. And honestly, Sasquatch hunters and growers might as well be one and the same. Just far out there as fuck. And James Bobo Fay is one of them.
Okay.
He goes by Bobo. He would bring up an interesting point about Bigfoots not being seen, but existing, being plausible. If you take a flight from San Fran to Anchorage, Alaska, overland, all you see is forests, mountains, rivers, just nature. And there's plenty of places you can hide.
Sure.
And that's a huge swath of land.
Yeah.
People think that America is like completely full. Oh no, we're full on the East Coast. Okay, we're full up here in Houston's. And we full in California, but there's a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah.
In between. He finally got, so David actually, while working with all these Sasquatch, because he's talking to like, not just Sasquatch hunters, but like to the old time growers, asking them about what they've heard about Bigfoot and their stories that have been relayed to them. He finally got a lead from a dealer in Oakland about a grower that was there around that time. The man had heard about the Sasquatch murder. And without leading him, David asked what his background was and what he knew. He would bring up that he had heard about it around town and in bars, and that it had happened in Spy Rock. Spy Rock is known for being dangerous due to the presence of Hell's Angels in the area, but also being a top spot for growing because it's further up the mountain. And above that cloud bank, there's almost no risk of rot, which is a harvest season nightmare. It could, as soon as you started seeing like mold or rot, you could have lost your whole crop. So this is like great territory to have, but also it's dangerous because it's so highly coveted. The man that he was talking to, his name is named Razor. I'm pretty sure that's not his Christian name.
His government name.
But he had been raised by the Hells Angels in the 60s and grew himself in the Triangle in the 70s. He recalled during that time that he'd always heard tall tales, but that the Sasquatch story had felt literal and real. That he had heard that Sasquatch killed 3 Mexican guys in the woods, and people were very concerned that Sassie was really up there knocking skulls and mangling the trimmigrants, okay? One day, while in the midst of this investigation, David would get a text from his PI, and it had came with a dire warning. Quote, I feel morally and ethically bound to warn you that you're venturing into dangerous territory. Unlike you, I live here and have a family to protect. Please be careful. And then he basically quit. Right as things were starting to connect, but for good reason. The history of Spy Rock Road is precarious at best before a murdering Bigfoot, okay? It was cut off from the world and known for its self-governing locals that didn't put up with any fucking nonsense. There had been plenty of murders, and of course in the 80s, camp really put pressure on the community, and that created even more trauma. So it sounds really lovely. I'd love to visit.
It does.
It was full of hippie rednecks who listened to Crosby, Stills, and Nash while protecting their grows with AK-47s, They loved to set traps to help circumvent raids by camp and rip-offs and things like that. It was pretty fucking dangerous. And people would they'd set up lines, and then if you cross that line, there'd be like a 2x4 with fucking nails would come down swinging at your head.
Oh, fun. So very like Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm. It's like if Kevin McAllister from Home Alone, grew up, moved to California, started growing weed, and said, I'm going to fuck up all these motherfuckers who's going to try to come up on my shit. Not today. So David would get a lead and meet up with an anonymous informant. It was an old grower, apparently, out on Spy Rock, and it was pretty chilling watching the footage as the two drove up on the man's property. The guy would say, do you know how many bodies we're passing by right now? As they're driving down the road.
Oh.
The anonymous grower would talk off camera about the murders, and as he put it, quote, soap opera drama of the mountain with such nonchalance. One story was of some outsiders who got murdered and buried in the woods, and a local woman's dog went out in the woods and found the boots belonging to one of the victims still wet from pissing himself.
Oh, my.
And as David walks around the property on the video, you could hear the anxiousness and somewhat excitement when he whispers to himself, like, holy shit. The old dude was throwing around the N-word with a very hard R, if you catch my drift, okay?
Oh.
So when David asked if he should be worried about his own safety being there, he responded no. This racist sentiment is more prevalent than you would think. Think about it. Like, there are all these good hippies out there. Peace, love, equality. Not when you have all these people that coming in for this green rush. You're getting a lot of less than savory types. There was another grower who would sum up that current and long-standing racial tension that led to such murders. He goes by the name Ghost Dance. I really love his name.
Love it.
Quote, up here, they put on this wonderful, we're enlightened, we're spiritual. No, this is enlightenment up here. The tension between the Latino people and the white people in Northern California is huge. There's a lot of hatred and bad vibes and a lot of racism. Very much. These towns are actually more or less, believe it or not, separated. During the 1800s, many growers actually hired Mexican immigrants who worked very hard and they saw the opportunity of the area. One grower would talk about, his work with the immigrants that were from Mexico, saying that they were twice as old as him and that they were doing twice as much work. And all that they were trying to do was support their families like any other decent human would do. But to some people, like to those who feel extra emboldened right now, racism has no logic and people will cut off their nose and spite their fucking face and eat shit just to make people they don't like smell their breath. But I digress. The sad fact is that due to the stigma of the black market growing, it's so hard for law enforcement to solve these crimes of all these people who are hurt, murdered, missing in this area. Many times, if there is even a call to law enforcement to investigate a murder of a Mexican trimmigrant,
they didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, well, many times they didn't have any identification on them, and somehow everybody got amnesia and didn't know who the person was and how they got there.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Like there was another murder they talked about, and it's a more recent one, and this guy was working up there, and he was murdered in his tent, and his family had to call law enforcement to go get him because they were called and said that he was murdered in his tent. Like somebody from the mountain called and said, yeah, he's dead. So his family from Mexico had to call to get get his body retrieved. It's fucking crazy. It was confusing for David at times because there were so many murders and everyone had heard something. And then you add the fact the area has such an insanely high murder per capita rate. It's just one story bleeds into another. There was one lady that he was like, you could smell the meth off of her, like when you got up to the building. And she said that, yes, I heard about some Mexican immigrants. My son saw the murder. And he's like, your son? And he's like, oh, he was about 5 years old at the time. And it was 2 Mexican immigrants. And they got shot. And the blood cast off hit my son's face. Like, ooh. So I had to wash the blood off his face. And it was later on from the murders that David was talking about. And it was only 2. Whereas there was 3 Mexicans in David's murder. And so, like, even though it sounded close, it wasn't the same. But it just showcased how many times that happened to him over and over again. And all those bodies probably just hidden up there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Mendocino County has 100% anonymous tip line, and they welcome all information. And I just wanted to put that out here, okay? 707-234-2100. And, it's like, when I was watching this, there was a wall of flyers, and it made me think of The Lost Boys. If you ever watched that movie, they had the wall of flyers and how everybody in that California seaside town was dying. Oh, California. Ew. Looking back after years of experience, realizing that the dudes that had come to the cabin that night were probably really geeked out on meth. And that he wanted to find them, but it knew in all likeliness that they were either dead or in prison. So he was able to reach out to another possible source, but this one wouldn't go on camera. He asked David to meet him and some other retired growers to have dinner and talk. So they do. They met at this restaurant. They're all drinking. And they're all having fun. And he's not talking about these murders. They're talking about everything but the murders, right? Eventually, it gets late. And all the other patrons in the restaurant leave except for David and these old growers. And he turns to him and he says, I hear you're looking for those 3 Mexican guys that so-and-so greased back in 93. That's pretty heavy. So he would say that the man that, like, they bleeped out the guy's name. So I can't tell you the name. But like this supposed man who had killed the Mexicans was a Hells Angel out on Spy Rock Road, and that he had been known to stick other Hells Angels on people. When bringing up this anonymous murderer, Razor, that we spoke of earlier, would visibly look uncomfortable and say, I want to avoid talking about that guy.
Oh, so he was still feared.
Yeah. And this guy grew up with the Hells Angels in the 60s.
Well, that's why he was scared. He knew exactly what they did.
He knew exactly what was going to happen if he said something. Ghost Dance wasn't, though. That was funny. Ghost Dance looks Hispanic, and he's like this little hippie guy. He's got like he makes me think of my dad. He's got like a big hat with a feather in it, and he's smoking weed. And then at one point in the video, he goes, oh no, guys. And he pulls out this little stuffed Bigfoot. I found Bigfoot. Like, Ghost Dance is just hysterical. He just described the guy, the murderer, about hyper. He was very high strung. A deadhead, but overall pretty nice. Which I was like, okay, well, that's a twist. He would confirm that he had been a suspect in a murder of another Mexican immigrant, but ultimately was never charged. And even though his weapons had been seized, he fought it out with lawyers and got his weapons back.
Okay.
So, of course, David says...
He fought the law and the law didn't win?
That's right. The grower won.
That's right. Good for him.
So David, of course, now that he has this name, I'm going to reach out to him. And he says... he gets a phone call from the guy and he's like trying to ask him questions. The guy's like, listen, I don't think it's going to be good for me to be on camera or in your little movie, but I'll answer you some questions. And one of the first things was that he had been on that mountain since 1991 at least. So when David asked him if it was safe for him to go up to Spy Rock and film and ask questions, and he was like, bruh, I would not do that.
I would advise against that, sir.
Sir, don't do that. I mean, for your own safety. And then David asked him, he's like, did you know anything about them? These 3 Mexicans in 93. And he's like, nope, nothing.
Never heard of them, never seen them. Don't even recall the story.
Mexa who? And after going back to the interview drawing board, he would come up with some consistent things that he was hearing. That, like, these were all like gossip on the mountain.
That they were murdered, that there was 3 of them, and they were Mexican. And that was all he could find out.
Yeah, well, that they were outsiders that had gotten a local girl strung out on heroin and meth. And apparently a major important grower ordered their death because of this. They had, quote, fucked with the wrong grower's daughter. And that would be consistent.
Oh, it was a grower's daughter that they got hooked.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, isn't the plan to get people hooked so you can sell your product, but not your children?
Not your children. They need to carry on your legacy. Your growing legacy.
You never use your own product.
Never use your own product. One story was that they had assaulted the girl, and regardless of what they did, appeared to be some kind of a revenge murder. Another important name came up, a legendary grower who had one of the first large operations in California, and he went by the name Bigfoot.
So Bigfoot did do it.
But did he? So he wasn't gonna go out of his way to mess with you, but Bigfoot Gary is his name. You didn't want to be on his mountain either. He wasn't going to fuck with you, but you don't need to fuck with him because he will fuck with you.
That sounds like the real Bigfoot too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, then it had David questioning his memories. Like, wait, did it say that a Bigfoot or Bigfoot killed him?
Yeah,
like Bigfoot the person.
The Bigfoot. A Bigfoot or the Bigfoot?
Exactly. So after speaking to a cop about a grower named Bigfoot, he immediately says, well, that sounds like Bigfoot Gary. He had been growing in that area for like 20-something years, and he grew huge acres of weed, leading to getting in trouble a time or two. David had a theory that the anonymous possible murderer could have worked for Bigfoot Gary and killed on his behalf, but that meant speaking to old Gary to find out. So he went searching for Gary and found a source close to him, supposedly. He said that he had heard, but had no proof, but was told that Gary had 3 guys murdered for raping his daughter. So again, another cooperation of the story. But then when he finally gets contacted by Gary and his wife Carolyn, they're like, nah, dog. He was growing in the 70s, left the area, didn't come back to 1996. So I wasn't even in town at the time, number one. And then she said that, well, listen, my husband is a dick. So he wasn't winning any Mendocino County's popularity contest, okay? He was known, but people make stories up about him, like he did this and he did that. And that he admits to knowing the anonymous murderer, supposedly, that he spoke to earlier, but Bigfoot Gary didn't have a daughter at the time. He didn't have a daughter until 2000.
Oh, well.
So it sounds like it just...
That's a monkey wrench in the story.
Just a rumor mill, just a milling about Bigfoot, because Bigfoot didn't do it.
And I'm sure Bigfoot Gary, if he's anything like me, if you tell stories about me that scare people away from me, I'm not going to correct them. No. By all means, be fearful and stay the fuck away from me.
Exactly. His wife was very much like us. She was answering. She's like, no, that's not what happened. And then he's like, well, can I talk to Gary or are you the intermediary? And she's like, Gary, he wants to know if he could talk to you or am I the intermediary? I was like, that was charming. So he hit a dead end, or so he thought. He had spent a year trying to pass a message to the grower of the farm that the murder happened on, till one day the farmer would finally respond. He said he would speak about it, but obviously anonymously.
Obviously.
He would say, quote, I'm going to lay out, and this is like from a recording. I'm going to lay out as much of this for you as I'm comfortable laying out. You're really only scraping the surface of crazy at this point. The story you heard that night, it's true. So what happened was a small group of old-timers. They got together one night, indulging in their stimulants of choice. This was getting on as harvest times. So people were working close to 24/7. And anyone who has a proclivity for certain illegal stimulants, they're going to turn from recreational use to serious sustained use, which of course is the, perfect recipe for this kind of shit. The Mexicans were becoming, more and more of a problem. Not all Mexicans, okay, the tough guys. That's a quote. That's not me saying that. What he means is apparently it had become a problem with these old, very old growers. They would hire immigrants or other trimmigrants. They didn't necessarily have to be Mexican. I think they were just saying it was the Mexicans, as racists do. And they would end up taking over a grower's operation and pushing him out. And it's not okay to do that, but it has also nothing to do with their race. Someone joked, man, while they're sitting there smoking and doing their stimulus of choice, man, I wish we had something like the chupacabra to scare the guys away. But they had something better. They had Bigfoot. And that's where the story started proliferating all over the area that David would end up hearing. Quote, those Mexicans needed to be made an example of in a way that made a statement. They tore down the plants and they threw them around like a huge monster had gone on a rampage, and they staged the whole thing.
Now that sounds very, very believable.
Exactly. So they used, because they asked her, like, how do you make it look? How do you make these bodies look like they have been torn apart? He's like, oh, easy. Bolt cutters, pickaxes, forklifts. They fuck their bodies up really good to make it look like it was Bigfoot. And when David asked if this informant participated, he said, no comment. Like it was a press conference. But he did confirm it happened and that the tweakers had come to the cabin had seen what they were supposed to see, framing Sasquatch for murder. They were talkers, those tweakers, and they knew the story would spread like wildfire, getting out to all those Mexican trimmigrants and telling them, get on out here.
Don't come over here trying to take nothing that ain't yours.
Exactly.
Or Bigfoot's going to get you.
As that racist would say. Not us. That's not how we feel. That's just us reflecting on what they're saying.
Well, no matter what your race is, like you said, don't come in and try to take someone else's stuff.
It's just not nice.
Because that's the best way to
get your shit rocked.
FOFA.
Especially
FAFO.
Yeah, FAFO.
Yeah,
we
there
just
we
like
go.
saying fucked around, found out.
Yeah.
We don't even need.
Sometimes I try to
acronyms.
tame my fucks. Just kidding, I don't.
So, let's talk about today's triangle now that we have exonerated our bestie Bigfoot. What's going on with it? Despite there being channels to legally grow and distribute weed, there's more money in the black market in the side of things. Up until 2018, 80% of the country's illegal pot came from the triangle. But since legalization and changes in legislation, it's becoming increasingly harder for these small farms to stay afloat. I became very small pro-business in this, okay? I want everybody to know that. I also thought it was just very interesting because, while I was listening to these stories about the Compassionate Use Act and everything, you would think all these growers would be like, yay, legalization. No.
Now they got to pay taxes.
They got to pay taxes.
They got to pay the man.
I got to pay for regulations. I got to do this. I got to do that. And then they're going to control how much my product costs and what I do with my product and how I'm growing my product. So a lot of them, when you look
It's what they should have done a long time ago if they wanted to stop all this.
Well, there's all sorts of attempts to get it legal prior to it actually coming legal. And there's maps, heat maps of California, and all the North California. It's like, no, we don't want it. I loved it. They're worried about oversaturation of the market, leading to loss of profit, the overregulation of the market, and that could just put people out of business just through extreme costs just to operate, not even to grow, just to operate. As it becomes legal in more and more states, except Texas, because fucking Governor Hot Wheels and his little simp Dan Patrick is trying to make hemp illegal again. But I digress. The demand for NorCal weed drops more and more. And many believe, unless there's federal legislation, the small farmers that started the Emerald Triangle will be in the past, replaced by corporations once again. And looking at this current administration, it's not likely to happen. So, did you know that Donald J. Trump is a teetotaler?
What's a teetotaler?
They don't drink, do drugs, or anything.
That's a goddamn lie. But
no,
anyway.
It's true. It is absolutely true. He had a brother who was a drunk, and it was his older brother. And he was like, you know how the Kennedys had an older brother and he died in the war and he was the Kennedy. He was supposed to be the one that was supposed to be president. It's the same thing in this situation. So after his brother wasted his life on alcohol, he was like, fuck that. And that's scarier to me. The fact that he leaves his house looking like that sober, or the fact that he's fucking this ridiculous while also sober. Again, I digress. Anyways, Bigfoot. Well, now that he's been exonerated, I hope he's traipsing around the beautiful weed fields in Northern California. Bob Gimlin died last year from the Patterson-Gimlin film. And with him, the absolute truth of Patterson-Gimlin film is also buried. One day, I'll make it to the Emerald Triangle, which is being billed as the weed version of Sonoma wine country. And as I take my little weed farm tour, it would be rad to see a sneak peek of little old Sassie.
It would be.
It would be like having a guardian cryptid, always lurking, protecting, watching. And that's the story of Bigfoot in the
Love
Emerald
it.
Triangle.
Love it. Round of applause.
Round of applause.
Very good. I enjoyed that.
I know it was probably way more than we needed. I could have done it all in one episode, but I don't know how to do that.
No. It gives a lot of context when you give all that pre-information. And I learned today.
Look at you.
Everybody that's going to listen to this is going to learn something new.
You're going to learn about Sinsemilla.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to learn about the Hells Angels.
You're going to learn about popping seeds on the 4th of July.
Papa seeds. So don't forget to find us on our socials, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Check us out on our merch. Don't forget to let us know about your own too close to home stories. Not that you smoke weed, but are you a weed dealer? What's it like for you? Are you best friends with a Bigfoot? Can we also be best friends with Bigfoot?
Yes. Can you make an intro?
Yeah, please. Don't forget to rate and subscribe on all the platforms you might listen, Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. And until next time,
stay safe.
Keep your head on a swivel.
And don't bring it too close to home unless it's to introduce me and Jen to Bigfoot.
Yes.
And then bring it as close to home as you can. I'll travel. I'm not saying I won't have a flight. But if he wants to come check out the rodeo.
Oh, fuck yeah.
He can stay here.
Get him some hat and cowboy boots.
Yeah. I got extra room.
Yeehaw, Sasquatch.
That's right. You can stay in JJ's office.
Bye. Bye. If you enjoyed this episode of Too Close to Home, don't forget to rate and subscribe to us on most platforms. Follow us on our social media at Too Close Home Pod on Facebook, at Too Close Podcast on Instagram, or if you have your own Too Close to Home experience, shoot us your story at tooclosetohome@yahoo.com. Thanks for listening.